continuing in our series of going through the major arcana. We may do it for the other cards too, but we're going through them in sequence, placing them in call, trial, return, Bardo, which comes from Jung. And then we are consulting the I Ching to see what hexagrams are associated, and we're posing a question. And typically the questions thus far have to do with spiritual principles, but now we're going right to the Tree of Life. We could have done that from the beginning, but the major arcana linking each of the spheres on the Tree of Life, and what you'll see online, in my opinion, is completely incorrect. I'm not sure why they don't have it correct. If you look at it sequentially, it's pretty obvious, and there are diagrams online that are correct that will tell you which letters correspond with which spheres, and then which letters correspond with which cards in the Hebrew language. In any case, so tower, you'll notice a blue and red figure falling. My belief is that the blue represents the yin. It's the part of the blood that is waiting to receive the hemoglobin, or the oxygen, rather. And the red is the part that is already saturated with oxygen, so that's yang. And they're falling because, and I think this is a reference to the Tower of Babel. If you go too fast, if you go too high, and you're not synthesized and integrating your shadow parts, then they're going to fall. So both negative adaptive child, which I call broken yin, and negative free child, which I call yang, they're both technically yang, but they're both falling. And they're both in despair. And this card is trying to link the receptive quality to balance. And we may only find balance when we fall, when we collapse, when things are not working for us. If things are working out, even if we're in an imbalance, like if we have too much money, or eating too much sugar, eating too much food in general, or too much other bodily pleasures, we lack balance. So only the crash is what brings us back to balance. And so we got hexagram 45, which we'll discuss shortly. Then we move to the trial, and this is the card we have is star. And you'll note there are 7 stars, which I assume relates to the 7 chakras, but then there's an 8th larger star, which is unity. They're all one. And this card is linking sphere 5 and 8. So 8 we've associated with culture and conformity, and 5 we're linked to limits and justice. And so it's a very similar operating feature, all on the left side of the tree, all about the kind of confines. And yet the star and the hexagram we got is 52. Maybe pointing us to something of a higher nature. Then we move to the return. If you recall, in the past, we've gotten the Wheel of Fortune, we've gotten the Temperance card here, and this is the harvest, the autumn, the dusk. So we go from dawn, day, dusk, or spring, summer, fall. This is when things are wrapping up. We're about to return to the Bardo. And you'll notice there's 2 towers, which reminds me of the 2 lions at the gate when you enter a temple in Asian countries. Often there's these 2 things, these 2 polarities, and I would say it's a reference to the red and the blue, to the negative adaptive child and negative free child, to sphere 7 and sphere 8, these kind of 2 forces operating in our world, and we are trying to pass between them. And I would say the same relates to wings on your Enneagram. If you're under stress, you may go to one or both wings at different times to try to find some kind of balance. But here we have, again, bringing that balance to the limitations, finding a way to make them harmonious. And typically I think that's the ideal parental figure, talking to the negative adaptive child and negative free child. And it can also have to do with your Cartman drama triangle, acting as the rescuer, the victim, or the persecutor, and the balance comes when you step off of that triangle. And what may be a way to work with this in the therapy session is to have the therapist and the client switch positions. In other words, you may start perhaps with the therapist behind a desk and the client in a chair on the sofa, and then switch. Play with the power dynamics. Finally, we come to the Bardo, and we have the Sun card, which is linking the sphere 3, which again is receptivity, understanding, and we're linking it to purpose. our movement to the other side, finally to the other side, to the right side of the tree of life. And again, we don't want to have too much purpose, and we don't want to have too little purpose. We don't want to have too much limits or too few limits. So we're trying to find balance. But here in the Bardo, where there's no boundaries in direction, we got hexagram 11, which is my favorite hexagram. It's peace. And that is where the earth is above the sky. And the hangman is trying to, as we spoke about earlier, trying to find that by being upside down. And if you look at Earth from space, and you're looking at the curve of the Earth, and you can definitely say Earth is above sky. But Earth above sky is another way of looking at reality. So moving beyond the obstructions, because hexagram 12, you have sky above Earth, which is what we have on Earth, and that's why, perhaps, or a reflection of why we have so many obstacles and obstructions and suffering. As Buddha said, life is suffering. We have desire and aversion, and those can be the falling. The blue on the tower could be the aversion, and the red could be the desire. Again, the desire is that sphere 7, that movement to try to make something happen, although it can happen in sphere 8 with cultural conformity, but that movement of trying to have more and get more desire, and that movement of limits and aversion, which is blue, perhaps. And the 2 towers, again, reflecting that in the moon card. But in any case, here, we can find our purpose, and our purpose may be not the way it's spoken about typically by spiritual teachers or capitalists or academicians, teachers, which is all about purpose on Earth. But I would suggest our purpose is harder to define and paradoxical, but it has something to do with bringing unconditional self-acceptance, USA, and compassion to whatever's arising in this moment. And this relates to Dolan theory, which I haven't really discussed in public. We're here to have this experience of this particular cycle of call, trial, and return, Bardo, and trying to find that sense of stillness, peace, presence, compassion, unconditional self-acceptance, even if there's identification, even if there's a belief that you need to have control, even if there's a belief that you're the one who is having the suffering. All the suffering that's happening is through a context of a story. A story about me, a story about time. But in the Bardo, we don't have me and we don't have time. Where there's no separation, there's no boundaries, there's no direction. And so it's ironic in a way that we're being receptive to purpose in a place where there's the gap. And as I've spoken about earlier, there's attempts made by either tower, if we want to talk about the moon card, by negative adaptive child, negative free child, negative controlling parent, negative nurturing parent, or positive, to send information over the gap, over the Bardo, to influence the next call, trial, return. But what we're saying here is we're not hoarding. Hexagram 3 we talked about. We're not hoarding, we're letting go. We're just entering the Bardo without any attempt to pass any information forward. It's a shedding, it's a surrendering, and ironically, that's how you find the higher purpose, not by trying to grasp onto some purpose based on your skills or your interests or your desires or what people are telling you or what you think the world needs. Instead, it's moving beyond that. It's a classic 4-circle Venn diagram used in business, which is relating to, what do you want to do? What does the world need? How can you earn a living? And I'm suggesting purpose is beyond the capitalist frame of what your job function is or how you're seen. It's much more subtle than that. It's really about unconditional self-acceptance and compassion for whatever's arising in you or with those beings around you.